Hello everyone, Conscientious Reefer here, and in today's video, I would just like to discuss what I use to test my reef tank and what I like to keep my parameters at. So, I guess let's get right into it. Also guess I'll start off with the most important one, salinity. Salinity, I like 1.025 to 1.026. I don't freak out if it gets to 1.024, but I definitely want to keep it that 1.025 to 26 range. Salinity dictates all your other parameters besides your nutrients, so you got to make sure your salinity is correct. And that is why I use the Milwaukee digital refractometer. This is a really good piece of kit. Not sponsored, by the way. But no, it was a little on the pricey side, but salinity is so important. I think, it's worth every penny. You don't want to cheap out, especially on something as important as salinity. So yeah, that's just what I like to keep my salinity at, what I use. So moving on to alkalinity. I like to keep my alkalinity around, I don't know, it's like 8.3 to 8.5. Like I don't freak out if it goes to 8. I won't freak out if it goes to like 8.8. Just in that range. I obviously don't want too big of a swing because corals, they crave stability. Um, but like I definitely like it. 8 is a really nice number for me because like you can go to 7 and you're still okay. You can go to 9 and you're still okay. That I just chose 8. I used to use Red Sea Blue Bucket, which DKH is 8, and now I'm using Fritz salt, and that is just mixed it up at 8. So you want to like. There's a little tip if you want to like keep your alkalinity at like 8. Don't use like a salt that's DKH is like 12. Just like pick a salt that matches the parameters you want. You know, but so that's what I have for alkalinity. So believe it or not, I actually really don't test calcium that much. Like because I dose all for reef, so I really don't test it that much. Like maybe a couple times a year. It's crazy as that sounds. All for reef, it's mixed up like in perfect sync with each other. So it just saves me an extra test I have to do. So yeah, I really don't test my calcium. But if I did test my calcium, I'd probably keep it around 440 to 410, probably something like that. I just don't test it, like I was saying. But moving on to magnesium, I'm actually working on setting up a doser because I manually dose magnesium, and every time I test my magnesium, it's always low. But I mean, if I could like snap my fingers, I would like to get it at like 1350, or even higher. I would like to get my magnesium higher because literally every time I've ever like tested my magnesium, it's always low. But what I used to test, I use the Salifert. That's what I use for everything pretty much. I use the Salifert test for magnesium nitrite or nitrate, sorry, and then alkalinity. Though they're just cheap, reliable, and they've been around forever. They're easy to use, simple to use. I'm a big fan of the Salifert stuff, but that's why I would keep my magnesium at. And onto the nutrients. For nitrates, a good range. I would like to be like at the minimum 5, at the most 20. It's kind of a little big range, but I mean, I had corals looking good. Like the nitrates right now are around 5 in here, and the corals look pretty good. And when the nitrates are like 20 plus, they look pretty good. But I would say like 15 to 10 would probably be my ideal range for nitrates. And then for phosphates, what I used to test is I used a Hanna ultra low range phosphate checker. This is kind of the king in my opinion of phosphate checkers. I've used a couple like phosphate tests, like the Salifert one. I'm not a big fan of. Like you can use like the API one, like the saltwater API one, but that the range on it is so big. But for phosphate, or that's what I used to test for phosphate though. Anything like the low end, it would be 0.03 on the low end, and then like on the highest out like would feel comfortable is probably like 0.15. So kind of a big range, but ideally like point 0.06 to 0.10 is where I'd be most comfortable with phosphate. the phosphates kind of crept up in this tank, and like some of the corals, like this PC rainbow has lost a little bit of color when the phosphates crept up. It used to look a lot better, and then I think the phosphates just creeping up kind of made it lose some color. The shortcake doesn't have as much pink in it as it did when the phosphates were a little lower. So, but now the phosphates are back at a better level. But yeah, so I guess for phosphates, 0.06 to 0.10 is my ideal range. But I don't get too crazy if they're like at 0.11, or like you want your tank to be stable, but you don't want to hurt yourself by chasing the numbers. Chasing the numbers is really bad. Going for stability is not bad, but if you're just constantly like chasing numbers and you're going like you're chasing like nitrates and like your dose, so like you see your nitrates are low and you dose a bunch of like nitrates or additives to increase nitrates, or really heavily feed, your nitrates are going to shoot up, and then it's going to be swinging around, and then you're like, oh, they're too high, let me lower them down to get to my ideal number, and now your tank is all out of whack. Stuff is big swings of nitrates, or that goes for any parameter. I think stability is more important than chasing the numbers. Have a range, but stability is the most important thing. Obviously water quality is very important as well. Like if you have, like kind of crappy water, you're going to have crappy results. But in conclusion, don't chase the numbers, guys. But I think that'll be it for today's video. Oh, one more thing. pH. I know a lot of people like pH is kind of a little like more popular, chasing pH. I don't. It's like I just use like the API pH saltwater kit. It's probably not the most accurate, but it's just what I have at the moment. I've never been too fussed about pH. Like anything from like if ideally I would have it at 8.3, 8.4, but I mean like the pH has been sitting around 8.1 in this tank. So I mean I'm not really too stressed about it. Maybe open up some more windows would probably help, but yeah, so that's kind of it for my parameters and what I used to test with. If you guys like the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. And I am going to Reefapalooza, California, so stay tuned for that video in a couple months. I'm really looking forward to going again. But till next time, see you guys.